Welcome back to Fem and Furious, where we are about to dive into maybe the hottest take I've had of all of 2026, which is that the NHL should be funding my fucking therapy bill. Because between heated rivalry and off campus, these fictional men have personally caused me about 87% of the emotional distress I've experienced all year. Today, if you haven't guessed already, we are diving into episode 7 and 8 of the off-campus series, where the emotional tension is high, the communication skills are fundamentally low, and everyone is acting exactly how I would act if I was 10 years younger, twice as hot, athletic, and also deeply afraid of any sort of vulnerability. There were moments over these 2 episodes that made me cry, moments that made me gasp, moments that made me believe that Louisa Levy has actually shaken these characters straight out of the Elle Kennedy series. And we're diving into all of it right after this. All right, welcome back to Fem and Furious. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela. Before we dive into all of the juicy goodness that is the last 2 episodes of the off-campus series, let's just do a little housekeeping. Starting Friday, we are diving into Every Summer After. That is the book by Carly Fortune. There is a TV show Every Year After that is coming out on Amazon Prime. We are diving into the first half of the book. This is a really great read. It's an easy read. It's a fast read. It's a fun read. It's a really good summer beach read. So if you've not read the book and you want to follow along, we're doing half the book. You can always come back and listen to it after, but we're going to do this book in 2 episodes. So we'll do 1 episode on Friday, 1 episode on Tuesday, and then we will jump right into the TV series next Friday. I've also added a section to this podcast. It is called the Feminist Follow Through. If you want more about the changes that this show is making to be more action oriented and to fold itself into the wave of feminism that is happening right now, I created an entire episode. It's 17 minutes. It's nice and fast and easy. It's just about the changes that the show is making and my deeper inspiration for where I hope the show can go. So you can find all of that in the show notes. I'll tag the episode. It's called Reimagining Fem and Furious. We are going into our impact era, okay? So that's there. The book, Every Summer After, I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. I also want to say, if you know anybody that is a bookstagrammer, book talker, or if you are a bookstagram or book talker, please send me a message. I would love to have book talkers or bookstagrammers come on as co-hosts while we deep dive books. So there's a few books that I know I really do want to be diving into, and I'm hoping that I can work with some bookstagrammers or book talkers. So if that's you or it's someone you know, or if you have a favorite one that you follow and you're like, I love their hot takes, let me know. Send me a message to my email at femandfuriouspod@gmail.com. Last thing, go subscribe to the Patreon. We are centralizing our community over on the Patreon. Again, I dive much more into this on the episode where I describe all the changes that are being made, but there are now 3 different tiers to the Patreon. There is just the regular Fem and Furious tier, which is free. It's got lots of benefits. I also want to invite everybody to the Common Thread Book Club, which is a book club where you can read any book, any genre, any length, so long as it correlates to the theme. We are meeting over Zoom on June 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the theme is Pride. So you can read any book under the theme of Pride. A link to register for that. It's completely free to you. This is just a community event that we'll do once a month. That is in the show notes as well. All right. With all of that said, let's get into our Chic peek. This is your spoiler warning. We are talking about all things off campus. We will also be talking about some stuff from The Score, which is Dean's book, since we can tell that part of the line change is taking us into Dean and Allie's story on a deeper level. The episode titles that we are working with today: episode 7, The Faceoff; episode 8, The Line Change; episode 7, written by Cheech Manahar; episode 8, The Line Change, written by Louisa Levy, and both episodes directed by Dawn Wilkinson. Here is your vibe check. Episode 7, the Faceoff. As tension rises on and off the ice, Hannah is forced to confront painful memories from her past, while Garrett struggles under the pressure of a crucial hockey game and personal family issues. Miscommunication and emotional walls threaten to pull everybody apart, leaving all relationships at their most vulnerable points yet. Episode 8, line change. The fallout from recent events pushes Hannah to finally reclaim her voice and share her truth with all of those that she trusts, maybe a few people that she doesn't even know. Garrett, too, breaks down his emotional walls, and therefore the two can find their way back to each other while new relationships and future storylines begin to take shape. Feral factor, both episodes, 9 out of 10. Think they were both great. Love them both. Obsessed. Who these episodes are for: high-stake drama babies, all of the artists out there, and fans of Hunter Davenport. I don't know if there are many of you, but if there are, stand up. Actually, that's not true. I actually was quite fond of Hunter Davenport in the books. So welcome Hunter Davenport to the chat. All right, let's dive into our Slay by Slay, where we will look at key moments, feminist themes, herstory, cultural context, and more from these 2 episodes. We start in episode 7 with Hannah just completely spiraling. She's grappling with the fact that they have dropped this Delaney bomb on top of her. Of course, nobody else knows that this is what has happened. And so her behavior comes as a bit of a shock to a lot of people. To Garrett later in this episode when he is looking for her, when she has been somebody who has been steady and consistent and reliable for him. To Allie, who's knocking on her door like, hello, what's going on in there? And Hannah is in this near catatonic state, their headphones on, just trying to block out the world. Now, I'm just going to say, shout out to Air Amplify, who sent me a pair of those Air Max headphones. I'm going to tell you right now, she cannot hear our girl Allie knocking. If she's got those on, those noise-canceling headphone settings, she can't hear Allie knocking. She doesn't hear a word that Allie's saying, especially if she's got music on. Shout out to Air Amplify. And shout out to Apple, who sent them to us. That was amazing, and I'm so grateful. They're the best headphones I have ever received in my entire life, and I love them so much. So I understand why Hannah's got them on right now, because they really do block out the entire world. They are a girl's best friend for when she is in the middle of this trauma spiral. Garrett shows up to his game. He's ready to play. He's ready to face Delaney. He doesn't know who Delaney is at this point, by the way, but he's ready. Garrett's ready to go on the ice, and he's ready to fuck the club up. He's ready. Seeing the look on Garrett's face when he sees that Cindy is still with Phil, absolutely heart-wrenching. The way that Belmont can just contort his face to say so many fucking things without having any lines or dialogue to support it. There is just so much from episode 1 until the last episode that passes over this man's face. That is such incredible acting. And I think this has been a huge part of the success of Heated Rivalry and the success of Off Campus. Not only are these beloved books that have risen to sort of book talk fame, but you have these actors who are actually acting. And you have a lot of writing that is trusting the audience to be smart enough to understand nuance and subtlety. I made a whole video on this on Instagram that low-key Louisa Levy commented on, and I really wanted to keel over and die. I was fangirling so hard. But it's so true. There is just a sense of trusting the audience and the audience being smart enough and the audience being engaged. You can't watch Heated Rivalry and you cannot watch Off Campus if you are also scrolling on your phone. And we know statistically that TV shows have been writing dialogue assuming that you're not paying attention because you're scrolling on your phone, which is why everything sounds so watered down, so dumb. And I just love that the show isn't doing that. And so much passes on Belmont's face, on Garrett's face here, when he realizes that despite the fact that he has pleaded for Cindy to leave him, that Cindy is not going to leave. And this is an adaptive change from the book, because by the time we get to the end of the deal, which is where we are at the end of this season, Cindy has left. Cindy has left Phil Graham, and that's a part of the emotional win that we get. So I want to talk a little bit about where it seems like we're going in season 2, because I don't think that we are at the end of Hannah and Garrett's story. And while I think that their emotional arc as a couple has kind of come to a conclusion, they both still have arcs and trajectories, especially Garrett that need to be taken to completion next season in order for me to feel really satisfied with everything that happened in season 1. And it seems a lot like they're trying to bring everybody in. So I'm assuming next season we're going to get a lot of John Logan and his stuff as they start to pull in his story with him and his love interest when we get there. And so like it seems like there's a plan, and I trust Louisa Levy. I trust her to take us through. But there is some stuff that happens in these 2 episodes that make me feel like we haven't taken Garrett's story in particular all the way to fruition. One of the things that I think needs to happen is I think we do need to see Cindy leave Phil. Another thing that I think needs to happen, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of like jumping ahead a little bit here, is in the book, Hannah gives Garrett permission to tell Coach Jensen and the team and whoever else may need to know about what has happened with the fight that Garrett gets into in the book. Because in the book, it's not Delaney, it's not the person that has actually assaulted her. It is just one of the friends of Aaron who has testified against Hannah. So it's not even the person that actually rapes her in the book that Garrett hits and gets into a fight with. And it's not on the ice. This person does not play hockey. It's when they're coming out of the locker room at the end of a game. So I will just say that it feels to me like Hannah needs to give Garrett permission to tell this story, or she needs to be the one that goes and advocates for Garrett and tells this story so that their season gets turned around, or so that something can change about Garrett's circumstances. Because while I respect the fact that Garrett does not want to share her story, and I think he does this multiple times where he's like, this is not my story to tell. The fact that he keeps saying that as his coach, as other people in the NCAA, that would clue me in that there's a little bit more going on here than like what's just happening on the ice between them as hockey players. And to me, that means that there should be some sort of investigation. If they're not going to do that, it feels to me like Hannah needs to be the one that gives him permission. And a huge part of Garrett's arc was telling his team how his father abused him. So by the end of this season, we have him telling Logan, which is a huge, critical, important step for Garrett. But I think he needs to take that story all the way to fruition as well. And that there needs to be some sort of consequences for these men, and that they don't just get off the hook, especially since in the book, it's just somebody who testified against her, which is fucked up and shouldn't happen and yada yada, but it's not actually the person that rapes her. The fact that we have on screen had conflict with the person that has raped Hannah, to me feels like in order to bring that story to fruition, there should be some sort of consequences where this person gets kicked out and Garrett comes back. And in my opinion, that should be when Garrett reclaims the captaincy in some capacity or another. But it seems to me like Garrett's no longer going to be captain at all, which I thought was an interesting adaptive choice. I know I'm kind of jumping ahead. So let's go back. Let's go back to where we are with this conversation between Phil, Garrett, and Cindy. Garrett and Cindy are both wearing masks in this scene. Garrett hides behind his stoicism. That's his mask. Cindy is hiding behind her smile. It's plastered on her. And the second that Phil turns away from her, her smile and her face completely drops because she knows what Garrett has said to her. She's living with the truth that Garrett has delivered to her, which is that you're not the first woman. You're not even the first person. He did it to me when I was a child. He did it to my mom and she couldn't get out. And now he's doing it to you. And this pattern is going to keep happening. And so you know that she's not unaffected by what has happened, though she left that conversation with Garrett saying it's complicated. And so we know that she's still in the cycle of abuse. And I think it would be really nice if next season we see that cycle close and we see Phil Graham lose in some way other than just Garrett telling him to fuck off and stop calling me. The fact that she's got this smile on tells me she's probably fucking exhausted from trying to keep up with the Joneses so that Phil stays happy and is happy with her. And it just made me so sad when you see her smile fall and the look that she gives to Garrett before her and Phil walk away. I also want to talk about something else that's coming up and sort of bothering me a little bit and it has to do with Jules. There have been a lot of actors who have come forward as non-binary characters or as non-binary themselves, and that these non-binary characters get so much hate from the general public. It happened with Bella Ramsey when they were announced as the actor that would be playing Ellie in The Last of Us. I mean, people are so abysmally cruel about the performance of Bella Ramsey, which I love. The Last of Us, the game, and The Last of Us, the show, both important to me. I launched this podcast with The Last of Us 2 because I love that show so much. And Bella Ramsey has received nothing but criticism and hate from so many people. It's absolutely wild to me. The same thing happened in season 2 of The Summer I Turned Pretty with Skye, the character Skye. And now it's happening with Jules. I've seen a lot of people on the internet bashing the fuck out of Jules. And it seems to only happen to these non-binary characters in a way that it doesn't happen with other characters. And the only exception I will say recently that I've seen is with Emma Darcy. I've not seen people come at Emma Darcy the way that they have come for these other actors who are playing these non-binary roles. Though Emma Darcy is not playing a non-binary role. They are playing a woman in the show. And so I don't know if that's because it aligns with people's gender perception, but that's also not what has happened with Bella Ramsey. So it's so interesting to me that people hate Jules's character this much because I actually quite like Jules for the most part. Do I think that everything that Jules is doing is necessarily progressing the story forward? No. But number one, Jules isn't going anywhere. They are Logan's sibling, which means that we are going to be seeing a lot more of them probably next season in season 3. The other thing is, I like that Jules is there to make hockey accessible to the girlies who thought that they would get an education through Heated Rivalry and didn't. Heated Rivalry is way less interested in the amount of hockey that is getting played and the semantics of hockey than the off-campus series. Why the off-campus series puts this much hockey in there, I'm not really sure. But I like that there is some on-ice tension, and it seems like there's going to be some on-ice tension in practice next season, so we're not done with the amount of hockey that we're getting in the show. And that's fine. It's a hockey romance. Like, hockey can be part of the deal. But I like that Jules is there as a sort of intermediary between us, chronically online, hungry hippos who want to, see more of these book boyfriends and the actual semantics of hockey. Now, with that said, I grew up 10 minutes from where the Islanders played. So I grew up a big hockey fan and like in a sort of hockey family in a hockey world. My first boyfriend played hockey, like everything. Hockey was a big part of my coming of age story, I suppose. And so I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about it, but I know enough to know that they are making the Bruins look fucking dumb for drafting Garrett. Sidebar, if you're watching the show, sorry, but I had a little bit of a location change. So the game starts, Garrett's playing like shit. And it has to do with the fact that he saw Cindy with his dad. And I guess I'm just a little confused about what the show is trying to achieve with Garrett's relationship to hockey. This version of Garrett Graham that we're getting on the show is presented as a very controlled person, except for the fact that he is incredibly emotionally driven on the ice. So he's really good at being stoic and kind of bottling everything up in every other circumstance except for when he's playing hockey. And we've seen multiple times across the season that he gets sloppy and almost out of control when he's in this heightened emotional state. And this is confusing to me that he got drafted when clearly he's an emotional player and this wouldn't be the first 3 times that this has happened over the course of his hockey career. He's been drafted before he even got to college, and he's now in his junior year of college. So he would be doing this throughout all of college. Like, how did he get drafted already if he's this emotional of a player? The other thing is, Garrett's been dealing with his dad his entire fucking life, has had to play hockey despite the tumultuous relationship that he's had with his father since he was a young child. So I'm confused at how he's this affected by Phil Graham and playing this way because of it. It doesn't really make that much sense to me based off of everything else that we've gotten about Garrett. But you guys can let me know how you feel about that. feminfuriouspod@gmail.com. Hannah's still spiraling. She's getting all these messages from Fifth Line popping up on her phone. I just want to be like, hey, Hannah, maybe we turn Instagram notifications off. Maybe we don't need a live deep dive when we're already in the middle of a spiral. She goes to the rehearsal room and she bumps into her professor, David. And I just, again, love how nurturing and attentive and tender this man is. Hannah is so quick to be like, I'm not going to do the showcase. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for me. I'm going to leave you alone now. And David is like, hey, I am still your advisor until that last dollar clocks out when the semester's over. So why don't you just get your money's worth and talk to me? And it's during this pep talk that she tells him that when she has told people her truth, it ends badly. And we know from the book and from the show how bad it really was for her. In the book, it was even much worse. Like, it cost her family to the point of almost like financial destitute. It seems to be not that bad for them in the show. But I mean, it's bad enough in the book where they can't fly to meet her anywhere or spend the holidays with her. Like, they have no money. So the fact that she really is taking on this emotional burden from everything that has happened to her, and how she does not want to share her truth because she's afraid that the more that she shares about what has happened to her, the worse that things actually get for the people around her. And she's trying to put the needs of everyone around her in front of her own needs, which is to maybe talk about it, is such an interesting relationship to her trauma and to the perception of her trauma, that the thing that is actually holding her back from fully healing at this point isn't necessarily the inciting event at this point, the rape itself, but the fact that she's afraid that by telling people it will ruin their lives. All the while, Garrett is losing his shit on his coach, losing his shit on his teammates. And again, I don't really understand how, if this is how he has been responding to hockey over the past 3 years, how did he get the captaincy? If this is not the type of player that Jensen wants to coach, why is it that he's in his junior year figuring out what kind of hockey player he wants to be? This should have been something that Jensen was doing with him from the beginning. So I'm kind of confused about Garrett's behavior when it comes to hockey. Not knowing if you love it or not, and not knowing if you're in it for the right reasons or not, I think is a really good emotional arc for Garrett to go on. But the way that he actually is acting in the locker room and on the ice, pretty much every time we've seen him over the course of the season, doesn't fucking make sense in my head and compute with where we know that he's supposed to be professionally and where he's supposed to be in his college career at this point. So he's blowing up Hannah's phone because he's like, I need baby girl to get down here and sing some fucking Elton John and calm my brain down. And Hannah's in the middle of a spiral, so she can't. She's just not able to do this right now. But I think it's very interesting that when she finally has this conversation with David and she gets centered and she is able to pull herself into a place where she can be centered and go show up for Garrett, that people thought that Garrett was going to yell at her and blow up at her. And I think that it is so interesting that multiple people have said the second that Hannah walked through those doors, they thought that Garrett was going to yell at her, tells us as a collective about what we are used to experiencing with men in the world and what we are used to experiencing with men in media. And this is why I wanted to have a show like this. I wanted to be able to talk about the way that media influences our culture and the way that culture influences our media. The fact that so many women were watching this show feeling Garrett was going to blow up on Hannah just tells us like how we as a culture, as a group and a collective of women, expect men to behave and how we have seen them behave in media as a reflection of what we have seen in real life, and how this show, written by women for women, has written what we want from men and what we can expect from men, which is why I think it's important for men to actually watch this show. And I think it's important for men to see the press tour that is happening, because these are not just actors who are stepping into these roles and then stepping out of them. You can tell by the level of physical intimacy, the level of emotional intelligence that they bring to the press tour is why they were chosen for these roles, because they are clearly actors who have the bandwidth to back up the values of the men that they are portraying on this show. And I think that that's critical. Now, let's get back to the hockey. Do I think that Garrett is playing like shit and not being a good teammate? Yes, I do. But do I think that Logan is also way out of line saying that he's not going to sit back and let Phil Graham's son do whatever he wants? Yeah, I do. Logan goes on an interesting journey. I think Logan is one of the most well-intended characters with one of the biggest ego shadows or pride shadows that just overcast his good intentions. And while I think that he's an incredible person and a great friend, in many scenarios, there are so many times when he thinks he knows best and that he lets that override whatever is happening in a moment or lets his emotional wave carry him forward in a moment, even if that wave is going to eventually recede. People don't always feel the same way when they're not in the heat of the moment, right? But Logan is somebody who consistently acts on these feelings, consistently acts on whatever he's experiencing in a moment, and it's very damaging to his relationships. And even though him and Garrett find a way forward, he also damages his relationship with Dean by the end of this. And I think Logan needs to go on a journey in season 2 and season 3. I'm assuming season 3 will be his season. In season 2 and season 3 needs to go on this journey where he can see past his own desires to actually support the person in front of him. Even though he's presented as one of the most emotionally intelligent characters on the show, like he consistently tries to get Garrett to open up. And of course, Garrett does by the end of this season, but like at what cost? You know, and I think it's important that he has this conversation with Logan. I really do. But Logan has some real work to do on respecting people's boundaries. Just because you think you know better than somebody doesn't mean that you can override somebody's boundaries or autonomy or desires for quote unquote the greater good, or just to get what you want out of a certain situation. That's not what a real friend would do. We'll touch back in on this with Dean. So Hannah shows up. She's able to give Garrett his pep talk that he was asking for. What I love here is that in the book, this monologue is very fucking bleak. I said in the episode that I covered this, the last episode of The Deal. If you're reading the books, I will tag the playlist for all of those episodes in the show notes so you can go back and listen to the podcast as you're going through the book. But on the very last episode that we did of The Deal, I was just like, I don't really think this is a great message to be leaving people with, because in the book, Hannah goes on this monologue where she says, "It's not fair, and I am angry, but life isn't always fair, babe. Look at your father. He's as much of a criminal as Aaron is, but he's not in jail either. If anything, he's still revered by every hockey fan in this country." And Garrett says, "Yeah, that's because no one knows what he did to me and my mom." And Hannah goes on to say, "And you think if they knew, they'd stop idolizing him? Some of them might. But I guarantee you a lot of them won't care because he's a star athlete and he won lots of games. So that makes him a hero." She goes on to say, "Do you realize how many abusers are walking around unpunished? How many rape charges are dropped because of insufficient evidence? Or how many date rapists get away with what they've done because the victim is too scared to tell anyone? So yeah, it's not fair, but it's also not worth agonizing over." And then she goes on to finish this monologue by saying, "Remember what you told me on Thanksgiving, how your father isn't worth your anger and revenge? Well, that's the best revenge right there, Garrett. Living well and being happy is how we get over the shit in our past. I was raped and it was awful, but I'm not going to waste my time or energy either, not on some pathetic, screwed up guy who couldn't take no for an answer, or his pathetic friends who thought he deserved to be rewarded for his actions." And I talked about this on that episode of the podcast where I was like, this is a bleak message to leave people with. This sort of harrowing reality of what victims of abuse go through, whether it's physical abuse or sexual abuse. And to me, it's just so depressing when you read that, especially when you're dealing with something like a romance where there's a happily ever after, but you have this sort of underlying effect of like their happily ever after is in spite of what has happened and not because they have actually gained any kind of justice, just that they're able to sort of move forward together. So I like that there's this tweak in the way that she delivers the theme of this monologue to Garrett, to herself, in this pep talk that she gives to him, where she says in the show, we can't let him win. We just show up and we live our lives. And she's saying that to herself because she knows she's going to have to go and face Delaney when she's watching this game. And she's saying it to Garrett, who is consistently facing his father. And there is a undertone of uncertainty as she's delivering this. She doesn't necessarily full-heartedly believe in what she's saying. She's not backing it up. She's just saying it because it's the thing that she can think to say that's going to get her through this moment. It's really a pep talk for her that just happens to also benefit Garrett. I also love that Garrett can see on her face the reaction to Delaney's name, but she tucks it away very, very quickly for him so that Garrett can calm down, and that allows him to get back on the ice and play. And she's ready and willing to suck it all up, so to speak, for an hour so that Garrett can just finish his game. And then I'm almost positive that she would have said something to him, but she's just trying to get him through this game so that she can get through this game. And of course, Delaney can't fucking help himself. He has to say, you know what the best thing is? It's going to be beating you in front of that lying slut. And he looks to Hannah. I loved this shot so much. Recognition dawns upon Garrett. He looks slow motion to Hannah, who doesn't really know what happened, but knows what happened, right? Hannah shakes her head no. She's like, don't do it. No. And he does it anyway. And he gets dragged off the ice. He walks to the locker room. He doesn't even give a second glance at Hannah as he's doing it. Hannah turns around. She's near hysterics at this point. She's got tears in her eyes. She's watching Garrett walk away from her. Garrett doesn't give her a second glance. He's so caught up in his rage. And so she goes and she waits by the car while Garrett goes into the locker room and has to contend with Coach Jensen. He's working the steam off. He asks Coach Jensen if he's going to yell at him. And Coach Jensen just so calmly is like, why would I yell at you when I need you to actually hear me? And Garrett gets this look on his face. He's so confused. We know that his dad had that fucking whistle that gave him like a trauma trigger in episode 2, right? When he's recalling how his father made him engage with hockey. And so he's just fucked up big time. He knows he's fucked up big time. And so he's like waiting for that whistle, metaphorically speaking. He's like, Coach, aren't you going to yell at me? And his coach is like, no, man, not the right course of action here, which is so powerful. And you can see the way that it lands for Garrett. Again, incredible face acting by Belmont. Garrett has had a father who has raised him in anger. And so he messes up. He makes a mistake. He is expecting anger as the response to that mistake. And when he doesn't get it, it's very confusing to him. Coach Jensen says, you're on the brink of greatness, but I can't help you get there if you're not in it for the right reasons. But the thing is, Garrett has never been given an option. His dad had him in skates the second he could walk. He never got to fall in love with the sport. He just inherited it from Phil. And I think that his coach saying this to him, you are on the brink of greatness, but I can't help you unless you're in it for the right reasons. You need to figure that out. You need to go think about why you want to play hockey. You need to know if you're showing up here because you're expected to because of your father and yourself and your own expectations, or if you actually want to be here. This pep talk is so warranted, and Garrett needs to hear this because this is something that he has been struggling with all season. And yet, he doesn't tell his coach what actually happened because it's not his story to tell. And there's much more to what has just happened on the ice than just Garrett losing his cool or being an emotional player. So Jensen suspends him for 4 games. He leaves the locker room. Garrett takes his jersey off of the hook and he's looking at the gram like he did in the very first couple of minutes in episode 1. And we're getting this like full arc moment where he is questioning his legacy when he looks at the jersey and he sees the name on the back of it, and he's wondering, what does it take to be a Graham? What does it take to be this elite upper echelons of like hockey players? What does that mean? What does it mean for me? Who do I want to be in this world? This conversation with Jensen leaves him with this question that he needs to figure out over the course of the 4 games that he's suspended. And 4 games, really not that long. Probably 1 or 2 weeks that he's going to be out of the game, right? Like, how many games are they playing a week? Probably twice, I think, maybe. At least once a week, 1 game a week. I don't know. Leaves the locker room and his dad tells him that he's proud of him for getting into this brutal fight because it's quote unquote some good old school hockey. Meanwhile, his coach, who he respects and admires, just told him the opposite. The fact that Phil hasn't paid him a single compliment over the course of the season, if ever, right? We've only been with Garrett for a short period of time, but let's say it's been never. He's never gotten a compliment. The fact that Phil has never paid him a compliment except for this display of extreme violence is incredibly telling. Phil tells Garrett, you get worked up, you lose your cool. It's part of the game. No biggie. That was some good old school hockey. You got into this brutal fucking fight out there. This is actually maybe the first time that Phil is attempting to bond with Garrett this way. And this is where it sort of like slams into Garrett the extent of what he has done perhaps. And so he says, so that's it, huh? As long as I have Graham on my back, I can beat people up with no consequences for the rest of my life, like you. And the two of them argue. And basically Phil is like, you benefited from everything that I have ever done. You had the best coaches, you had the best equipment. And if you don't appreciate where you are now and you don't want to be like me, that just makes you ungrateful. And this lands for Garrett too. Like, he's been struggling with why he likes hockey, why he plays hockey, why I'm good at hockey. He's got it coming from every angle. He's got Logan, who is jealous of him. He's said that he would feel relieved if he couldn't play anymore. He's got a contract with the Bruins. He's got all these sponsorships coming in from playing. He's the captain, maybe youngest captain they've ever had in his junior year. And now he's got his dad telling him that he's proud of him for doing something incredibly violent. And Garrett arguing back and saying, you're the one that's grateful that you got to put me in such a violent sport so that no one would question the bruises that I have. Like, yikes. This is such a critical moment for these two men. It is so important for Garrett to stand up for himself and to advocate for himself and to finally get to a breaking point with Phil Graham. And it is also important for Garrett's emotional arc for Phil to tell him, you're already just like me. The fact that Phil sees himself in Garrett is a huge loss for Garrett on the ego side. And I think this is interesting because Hannah gives this pep talk to him where she's like, don't let them win. And the fact that he just lets them win by giving them exactly what they want, which is to give into the fight, which is to exact justice in his own way, taking justice into his own hands, is the opposite of what Hannah says. And so finally, we're getting the unraveling of Garrett Graham. And he needs to. He needs to unravel everything that he thought that he was so that he can rebuild himself into the man he actually wants to be. But man, when I heard Phil tell Garrett, like, you're already just like me, you already are, the way that he says it, it's so menacing, it's so quiet. It reminds me of that game that we played in the 90s. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're a 90s baby. But there was this game called Don't Break the Ice. I don't know why of all the games from the 90s I thought of this game. I don't know if because we're dealing with hockey that it's on my mind. But you would stick this polar bear onto the ice skating rink, and then you had to like tap out the different ice cube pieces. It was sort of like a Jenga type of game, but different, a setting or construct of how it works, but essentially, like, if you're the one that breaks the ice, you're the one that loses. Sorry if you've ever played this game before and I just mansplained that to you, but like, that's what this reminds me of. Like, Garrett had like one little ice cube holding him up. He's that polar bear skating on thin ice, and he had one little block holding it up, and Phil Graham was just like, you are already like me, and there it goes. The whole thing collapses. Garrett is inward spiraling, and this just takes him from bad to worse by the time he gets to this conversation with Hannah. Hannah's mad, and Garrett completely dismisses her. Now, I don't have the quote right in front of me, but in one of my favorite books, Eleanor and Park. Eleanor is a character who is sort of relentlessly bullied or teased, and Park kind of comes in and acts on her behalf one day and gets into a fight. And Eleanor is the one who says, please don't get into this fight. I really don't want you to get into this fight. And he gets into the fight and says something similar, like, I was defending your honor, in the way that Garrett does here. And I love what Eleanor says, which is like, you didn't get into this fight for me. You got into this fight for you. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what Hannah is saying here, which is like, I shook my head no at you. I told you no. And Garrett accuses her of lying, and she's like, I didn't lie to you. I was just putting it on hold so that you could get through the fucking game, and then we can maybe have a conversation about this. And he says to her, like, but you don't know what he said to me. And she's like, yeah, I do. What do you call me? A liar, a slut, a whore? Like, she's like, I heard this every single day of my high school career. But guess what? I'm desensitized to it, and I was willing to put it on the back burner for you. I didn't want you to jeopardize your stuff for me. I didn't ask you to do that. You decided to do that all on your own. He yells at her. He's like, I was fucking defending you. And she goes, every time I tell someone my truth, it fucks everything up. So in this one situation with Delaney, this fight that Garrett has with Delaney, everyone's worldview is proved correct. Okay? Garrett walks away thinking that he's as violent and as impulsive as his father. That's how Garrett is leaving this conversation with Hannah, this fight with Delaney. this conversation with Jensen, this conversation with his father. Hannah walks away thinking she can't talk to people about this incredibly traumatic and horrible thing that has happened to her without it ruining somebody's life, which she then points out to Garrett. She says, tell me you didn't just put your season at risk, your contract with the Bruins. She was willing to put it aside so that the thing that is most important to Garrett is not put at risk. And it's frustrating that Hannah can put Garrett's needs above hers, but Garrett can't understand that and do it the other way around. And the way that he actually does try to do that is by fucking breaking up with her. Like, it's the most coward way out of a situation because that's what he thinks is prioritizing her needs. Like, I'm not good for you, so I'm just going to walk away from this because that's prioritizing your needs. Like, that's not the solution, but okay. And so she's honest with him. She says, it scares me that you would risk everything for me when I'm telling you that's not what I want. And all Garrett hears is that she's scared of him, which, baby, is not what she said. It's not what she said. She did not say, I'm scared of you. She said, that scares me, Garrett. And then she goes on to say, it scares me that you would risk everything for me when I'm asking you not to do that. She never says, I'm scared of you, what you just did, and that act that you did with Delaney scares me. That's not what she says. But that's how he conceptualizes it, which is when I'm like, men need critical listening skills because that's not what she said. And then she even goes on to say, I didn't say that. That's not what I said. And he's like, nope, that's what you said. I'm no good for you. I'm just going to bounce the fuck out of here, almost run you over with my car while I'm trying to do it. So now Hannah goes into her emotional spiral, and we get a little bit more information that her writer's block is more directly tied to having to write the police report. Her bike breaking down is like the fucking last straw for her. That's her little Jenga tower crumbling. She tells her mom that she lost the scholarship. And I just love her mom is like, okay, just breathe, calm down, breathe. Let's start with the small stuff, which is something that Hannah has reiterated multiple times over the course of this season. So knowing that this is something that has probably come from her therapist, that has been implemented by her family in order to help her, is so special to me that her mom can say this. And Hannah just goes on to, she feels that she's just ruined Garrett's life. She feels like she's ruined her parents' lives by costing them all this money to the point where she's like, we can't fix my bike because we can't afford it because I don't have my scholarship anymore. And her mom's like, it's okay. We're doing okay. And her mom is so amazing. She listens to this whole speech about how Hannah feels that she's ruined her lives. And she says to her, what did you do wrong? And Hannah sputters and she's like, what do you mean? She's like, if you're feeling guilty, it means that you must have done something wrong. And just by saying that, she absolves Hannah of feeling like she did something wrong when in fact she was just raped. Like she says, you were just a high school kid who went to a party and had a drink. You didn't do anything wrong. It's a normal thing to do. And then says, let us do our jobs and take care of you. That's my job as your mom, to take care of you. And I just love this conversation because you can tell how long Hannah has been holding on to this idea that she has ruined her parents' lives. And this is the beginning of Hannah's real healing, where she is able to really understand that she didn't do anything wrong and that she hasn't ruined their lives. And so it starts to reshift that perspective for her and allow her to get where she's going to be by next episode, which is creating her song. Garrett gets home, Logan pushes, but again, Garrett doesn't want to say anything because it's Hannah's story to tell. And he knows that it's Hannah's story to tell. So he says, I don't want to talk about it. Because what can he honestly say that isn't going to put Hannah under the bus or put Hannah in a precarious situation? And Logan goes, you never do. So you can just tell how many times that Logan has tried to have a conversation with Garrett about whatever it is that he's feeling, and how many times that Garrett has just stuffed it down and walked away. Allie walks in. She's on a high. She's feeling good after she just made out with Carter St. James. But she sees that Hannah's got the hot Cheetos out and she immediately drops her shit and runs over. I love that the hot Cheetos is an indicator for them that they are in like Depression City and they need help, or that they're going through a breakup, and that just that alone and the way that Hannah looks at her is enough to get Allie onto the couch with her, giving her a hug. I love their friendship. It means so much to me. At the end of this episode, we've got Garrett playing an NHL game. Again, could be doing anything else. The man finally has 10 seconds to himself, no practice, no games, but he's not out with his friends at Malone's drinking. He is at home playing an NHL video game. So that's where we are at with Garrett. And I think there's an amazing metaphor in the fact that he literally stops skating in the game. He puts the controller down and he's just like standing there while everyone else is skating on without him in the game. And this is him at a standstill, wondering if he actually loves this sport, if he actually cares about this sport, and if he wants to actually play this sport. So that's where we leave Garrett at the end of this episode. And then we go into the line change. Now we've got a montage of the breakup city, which ends in a split screen of Hannah and Garrett in the same room as they're taking their philosophy final. And I loved that shot of them in the same room, but still on a split screen. I thought that was so powerful. Hannah then goes to take orders at Malone's. All the guys are like, we've got girlfriends. We don't want to talk to you. We want to be seated anywhere else. Sean walks in and ends up blabbing about the hands-off Hannah rule, to which we've got Hannah storming into the locker room with, again, one of the funniest bits from the book. The penises everywhere. In the book, the quote is, "Horror slams into me as I register what I'm seeing. God, I've stumbled into the penis convention. Big penises and small penises and fat penises and penis-shaped penises. It doesn't matter which direction I move my head because everywhere I look, I see penises." I love this part of the book. I actually think this is one of the funniest bits where she walks in and this is like her dawning of what a men's locker room is, to which Dean points it out in the show. He's like, this is a locker room, babe. Hannah starts yelling at Garrett. She's like, how dare you implement this hands-off Hannah rule, you fucking misogynist, is basically how she comes in there. She's like hot and heavy. She's yelling and she's ready, and everyone's sort of on looking, like the entire locker room is pretending like they're not a part of the conversation, and yet they keep piping in. It's really funny. And so we learn that it's locker room gossip that sort of got away from the locker room. And I like this change. I like that Garrett does not override her autonomy, which is a problem that happens in the book many, many times. And so I like that, you know, the younger guys are like, Dean said that if anyone started hooking up with Hannah, that Garrett was going to beat the shit out of them. And he's like, that's not what I said. Like, they're kind of arguing about like how this locker room gossip sort of spiraled out into the world. And Logan is the one who looks at the younger guys and he's like, go and fix it. This is locker room gossip. Go and fix it. And I like that Logan, even though he's in this fight with Garrett, even though they haven't made up yet, even though he doesn't really know what's going on, still has Garrett's back. I love that all of the characters are calling out how fucked up the campus-wide hands-off rule was, book style. All of the characters keep like coming back to the fact that this is like the fucking worst, and that Garrett in the book is awful for doing this, and that they're taking this sort of feminist approach to how the hands-off rule got implemented, which is really just through gossip, which I think actually makes more sense and is much more true to life to me than just Garrett kind of going out there and telling everybody that they can't hook up with Hannah and that that means something to people. So from there, Garrett goes into his NCAA meeting, comes out in a not good spot because, to be honest, he posted a video of him practicing with the Bruins. He went to go observe one of the Bruins games. They asked him to take a shot. At the end of it, he posted it on his Instagram. The NCAA now calls him out on that and calls him out on this fight and tells them that because of him posting that video, that now all of their wins don't count because technically they are going against the NCAA's rules. Garrett's like, fuck, everyone's going to be so mad at me. And Jensen's like, you know what? Maybe, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is like, do you love hockey? And again, Garrett looks so confused by Jensen asking this question. He's like, I don't know if I've ever been asked this before. No one's ever maybe asked me if I want to play hockey or if I even like it. So I like this. I like that Jensen is somebody that has moral and ethical integrity and is holding his team to this standard and is asking Garrett if he even loves this game. And he then tells Garrett baby, go figure it out. You need to figure out whether or not you even like this game. And once you figure that out, you can come back to me and you can let me know and we'll figure it out from there. So this is a change from the book, but now the boys, Briar Yu is in dead last place and needs to win every single game in order to get to the Frozen Four. So we get this conversation between Logan, Tucker, and Dean about them being pissed about everything that has now happened with Garrett and how they need some help on the team. And so they're thinking about calling Hunter Davenport. So a little spoiler alert from Dean's book, The Score. If you don't want this spoiler alert, just skip ahead like 30 or 60 seconds. In Dean's book, Dean is a mentor to Hunter. So they don't have this tumultuous relationship in the book, not at all. So this is an adaptive change and it's going to be interesting to see what has happened between them. Dean clearly has a huge fucking issue with Hunter in the show. And he says, he's a selfish dick with a piss poor attitude and I'm not fucking playing with him. This is the first time that Dean has been anything other than absolutely chill. He's been sad boy. He's been lover boy. He's been sexy boy Dean. He's been intermediary where he's trying to break things up or say like it's not that deep or like keep the peace Dean. But this is the first time that he's really had this assertive of a response to anything that's happened in the show so far. So clearly something is going on. We learn then from Jules that it has something to do with Summer, Dean's sister. Now, again, I'm going to spoil something from the book series, though not necessarily Dean's book. So skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. This is true to the books. Summer and Hunter have an interconnected relationship. They went to school together. Hunter and Summer end up living together. And so that is true to the book. Okay. But we don't know what's happening in the show. And clearly they're adding this as a tension point. Meanwhile, I'm sorry, skip ahead if you don't want to hear. Meanwhile, there's a lot of ground left to cover in Dean and Allie's emotional arcs. So I'm really interested in what's going to happen next season. So speaking of Dean, Allie wants her and Dean to sleep with other people. She wants to lower the stakes on their relationship. And I wish that she could just get Sean out of her head where Sean is like, you can't even be alone. And the fact that she has just told Carter St. James, like, I am seeing somebody and it is something and I don't want to hurt them. So I'm not going to sleep with you. And now she comes in and has this conversation with Dean that's like hurtful. And she knows that it is. She won't even kiss him goodbye. She just sneaks in, kind of tells him to go fuck somebody else and then leaves and doesn't even like take his emotional needs into consideration at all, especially when he has just texted her that like he got some really bad news and he's calling her to help take his mind off of it. So she knows that he's not in a good frame of mind and now she's just like making matters worse for him. And I feel really bad for Dean in this moment. We've got Garrett scrolling on his Instagram story, AIM style. He's posted on his stories something that is clearly meant to be a subtextual message coded for Hannah. So he's scrolling his views to see if Hannah's looked at the page, which she hasn't. And Hannah will later confess to Jules that she has been watching Garrett's stories through Allie's stories. So anyway, this very AIM style coded away message directed towards a specific person. When he sees that she has not viewed his story, he then goes to her page, goes down to that video of her singing and likes it, like very intentionally likes it to let her know that he's looking at her stuff. And I just can't get over how millennial coded this entire scene was, but I love it and I was kicking my feet at it. Hannah finally tells Allie that her friend from high school is her. And what I love is that Allie already knew and she said, yeah, you're the friend. I just thought you'd tell me when you're ready. And the fact that she knew that she was protecting Hannah in the beginning of the show in episode 1 when Sean is like, let's get some drinks. And she's like, Hannah's friend was raped, so we don't drink out in public, right? Knowing that now was her defending Hannah directly and not just like supporting her to be a girl's girl. I just really, really love Allie in this moment and the intimacy of the scene. It's very tight camera shots on their faces. So there's not much to distract you from the emotional intensity of what is happening in this scene, which is Hannah finally coming forward to all of these people. She's had this conversation where her emotional pot has sort of boiled over with Garrett, where she's like, I ruined your life. She had this talk with her mom, who then is like, you haven't ruined anybody's life. Like, hello, no, you haven't. And so she finally is honest with Allie. And this weight that is now lifted off of her shoulders by being honest with people and telling them her truth and getting the support that she needs, not from Garrett maybe in this moment, but from Allie and from her mom and from David, honestly, free her to then create the song that she goes to create for the pop showcase. I also love that in this conversation, Allie, ever the supportive bestie that she is, says to Hannah, the Hannah that I love is that girl. And she's talking about the girl that wrote this song before she was raped. She is the girl that she is now, who has been through this sexual trauma and has come through it and has made friends and had relationships despite it. And all of the girls in between. You're not just one thing. You're everything. The love that these two women have for each other, the bond that they have created, the friendship that they have founded is so special and is such a good depiction of how healing a good friendship can actually be for your soul. And there's so much of this with the boys and their friendships too. So I don't want to discredit just what's happening with the boys, but there's something so special about having a girlfriend that just has your back, that supports you, that loves you, that encourages you, that hears your worst fears and talks you out of it and validates you and everything in between, sees you with the hot Cheeto bag and knows what's going on and just immediately comes to your side. And I love this relationship between the two of them, and I can't wait to see more of it in season 2. Hannah goes to Jules to get some sound effects for the song that she's putting together, and then little wink and nod if you've read The Mistake, which is Logan's book, happens right in this scene. So Jules says, I've got some friends who work at the radio station. And then there is a very quick cut to Logan as he's walking past and observing Jules and Hannah talking together. So just if you know, you know. Now this show loves to have Hannah and Garrett in a space with a separation. Since the very first episode, Dancing with Myself, we've had a split screen. They're talking to each other at Dean's birthday party. There is a split screen. We have gotten the split screen between Hannah and Garrett so many times, just many times when there literally is a physical division between them. And this is another example. They are broken up. They are no longer together, and yet they're making their way back towards each other. And so Hannah's coming down the tunnel from the locker room sort of to the rink, and Garrett's on the ice skating around. And there is this shot of them sort of standing and looking and facing each other. But the board of the rink is literally dividing them. Big, thick, physical divider between the two of them. So in this conversation, Garrett confides in Hannah that he doesn't know if he wants to beat his dad or if he wants to be like his dad, and that's very confusing to him. And this is his center of conflict with hockey. And so Hannah convinces Garrett that he's obviously in it for the right reasons, because he once told her that if he could no longer play, he would feel relieved. And yet he literally can't play. He's suspended right now. And instead of being anywhere else, he is at the rink and he's skating around and he's on the ice. So she then tells him, you have something to play for. You're in it for the right reasons. The reason that you need to play for somebody is the man on your right. And she's talking about Logan, who she says has had your back even when you're an asshole. I agree and also disagree, but okay, we'll leave it at that. We've talked about Logan a lot here. Hannah leaves. Garrett then goes through the Fifth Line's hockey Instagram and sees a video of him beating the ever-loving shit out of Delaney, to which I'm going to say, Jules, why are you leaving that up? Why are you leaving that up, baby? He sees that Logan is the one who pulled him off of Delaney, which is also true to the book. In the book, Garrett says that he is in such a rage that even when Logan pulls him off, he then hits Logan. And it's only when he realizes that he hits Logan that he starts to come out of this fog that he's in. Seeing the video brings a memory back to Garrett where Logan grabs him by the helmet and says, I've got you, and forces him to look at him so that he can break out of whatever it is that he's doing with Delaney. And it's why he ends up going back to the house and confiding in Logan, because he realizes that Hannah is right, that Logan has always had his back, even when he hasn't deserved it, even when he's being an asshole, that he's like, I've got you for whatever he knows has happened. He doesn't even need to know the details of what's happened, but he still has Garrett's back. The way that you could see that this is viscerally, physically, emotionally painful for Garrett to finally be able to confide in Logan, where he goes to Logan and he's like, you're the one who pulled me off of Delaney. And Logan's like, yeah. And he's like, thank you. And Logan's like, cool, man. Like, all right, you're welcome. When Garrett finally says, I need to tell you some stuff, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be like my dad. That's when Logan stops what he's doing and goes to stand with Garrett and gives him his full attention. And he's like, okay, finally, Garrett is ready to open up and tell me. And this is, again, so good, I think, for the men to see. I think it is good for you out there listening to watch this with your boyfriend and let your boyfriend see that men having conversations about emotional vulnerability and topics that are emotionally difficult to digest and process is important to have with other men. Sure, Garrett says, I had Hannah and I told Hannah she's the only person that knows. But the fact that he brings it to Logan and gives Logan this critical piece of information about who Garrett is as a person, fundamental to who Garrett is as a person, is going to be cathartic and healing for their friendship. And you can tell that it is because by the time that we get to the point where Garrett gives him the captaincy, they have already mended ways. They have already figured out their path forward because Garrett can finally be honest about what has happened to him. And Logan can now understand everything that Garrett is and who he is and why the way that Garrett has responded to him or overridden him by going to Phil or other things that he may have done over the years has been completely hurtful to Garrett. And so I love this for men. I love these two men having a beautiful conversation about emotions and feelings. Bringing that up on the rear is Dean and Bo having a conversation about Allie, where Dean's like, I have been hooking up with Allie. And Bo is like, yeah, I have eyes, bro. Like, I know. And so instead of just letting Dean cop out and just give Allie whatever it is that she wants, he's like, you need to stop being chicken shit and tell her how you feel. Again, we love that men hold men to a standard of emotional intelligence. He's not just like, good for you, man. This girl that you like told you that you can go get pussy anywhere. He's like, really being honest with him. He's like, I think that you should tell her how you feel before she goes and hooks up with somebody else and you feel bad about it. And I think that that's incredibly emotionally intelligent, and I love Bo and I will forever love Bo, and I think that Bo is one of the best characters on the show. TBH. So taking his advice, Dean then calls Allie. She sees Maverick come up on her phone. She assumes that it's because he's completed the mission, completed the assignment. So she looks up who's in front of her. Carter St. James, aka Hunter Davenport. She sees this man's washboard abs and the ab V that trails downward that's hanging out by his hips. And she's just like, tuck one hair behind my ears. Hey, Carter St. James, remember when you pulled my chair in real sexy style? Would you still want to have meaningless casual sex with me? And Carter St. James, aka Hunter Davenport, is like, say less. Big change that they've made from the book is that Logan ends up with the captaincy, that Garrett gives it up and gives it to Logan. I think this is a weird choice. I don't know if I like it. I'm struggling to understand then what Garrett's journey through this is and what Logan's journey is going to be through being the captain, and what that means. Or if him giving the captaincy to him gives him an opportunity to actually get on the Bruins, and maybe that's where that's going. But like, it just seems to me a little counterintuitive or counterproductive because being captain is a huge part of Garrett's journey in the book, though Garrett's journey through the season of TV is much different. So I guess we'll see if maybe that comes back to Garrett in some way, and I feel like it should. I feel like there should be a moment where Garrett reclaims the captaincy, and I hope that that happens over the course of the show. Garrett, though, is sitting in the stands alone, by the way. I think this is the fucking weirdest thing of everything that's ever happened in the entire series so far. Garrett, supposed to be the most popular boy in school. He's not on the bench with his team, even though he's not playing. I get it. Okay, fine. But don't you think that he should be on the bench supporting them next to Jensen? He's not with Bo, who is in a different part with their friends. He's not with literally anybody else. He's just sitting alone in the stands by himself. I think that's a little weird. But in this moment, he then sees a young boy wearing his jersey who's rooting for the team, who stands up, he's clapping. And I think it's in this moment he realizes the power of influence that he could really have if he was playing hockey for the right reasons. And I think that this is a part of the persuasion of seeing who he could actually be as a player. That sign of the kid with Phil Graham, who's holding up a sign that says, "In Graham we trust," like he could really be worthy of a sign like that. And what do I do with that information? And I think that helps him get to where he's going by the end of this episode. Allie, who is in a post-coital Hunter Davenport haze, finds out that Hannah is doing the showcase. And so she calls Dean and she's like, you got to get Garrett to the showcase. Dean tells Garrett, hey, Hannah's doing the showcase. We all have to go right now if we're going to go support her. Garrett's like, how do you know that? Dean's face is so funny because he hasn't thought of a lie to come up with this yet. And he's not going to say Allie either because he knows that she wants to keep everything a secret. So Bo steps in and he's like, I heard it in the stands, which I love that Bo is sort of backing up his bro right here, that him and Dean are number one bros. Everyone sprints and takes off. We're ready to go support Hannah. Except for Garrett. And Logan turns around and he's like, hey, I think getting a moment where Logan tells Garrett, you're not like your dad, is important to Garrett's healing journey as well. So we've got Hannah's song, the hockey sounds in the background, the slap shot, the skating, all of that. Awesome. But also the fact that they are pretending that you can see anything when there is a spotlight in your face. They literally even say it in the book. There is a line from the deal that says, contrary to what the movies and television shows lead you to believe, it's impossible to make eye contact with a face in the crowd when a blast of light is hitting you in the eyes. That is the truth. As a theater girly myself, I can tell you right now, you might be able to hear and distinguish someone's voice that you know from the crowd, but you can't see anybody's faces. You really can't. So the fact that they're sitting like front row and they're pretending that they can make direct eye contact with each other and have this intense emotional connection throughout the song is just like not true. But okay, whatever. I cried though. I cried during Hannah's scene. I think that this is so beautiful. I love the song. I love that it keeps cutting to Allie and throughout it, because so much of what she's saying here is like, I am the girl that I am because of who I used to be, that this is directly from this conversation that she had with Allie. So I love that it keeps kind of flashing to Allie as this is happening, except for when she says, I'm the girl that I am partly because of you. And then it flashes to Garrett. And then she gets a standing ovation because the song was fucking awesome and I really loved it. So I'm getting actually even a little choked up. I thought this was beautiful. I cried literally every time I watched this, and I watched it a couple times at this point. Outside, after the showcase, Garrett is there. He's waiting for her, and he says, I want to be more like you, Wellesley. I thought this little banter at the end was cute. I thought their happily ever after for now is cute. I think there's more to their story that I'm hoping will complete in season 2. But for now, I think it's a nice little bow on where their story came so far. And I'm hoping that we get a little bit more into season 2, a true happy ending where their abusers come to some sort of justice. So we end with the literal line change. Okay, we are switching lines. We've got Hunter Davenport, who's coming in and going to be a part of the ensemble. But we also have a literal line change. We're going from Hannah and Garrett being the stars of the show and the story that we're focused on to Dean and Allie. So Dean approaches Allie. He says, I get it. You love love. That's what you said at the fireplace. That's what you're looking for. And he goes, so I'm here to let you know I didn't complete the assignment because I like you and I don't want to. And she's like, no, you have to. And he's like, why? And she's like, because I did. Cue Hunter motherfucking Davenport, who walks through the door. Bo is immediately like, that guy? He just picks it up from Allie's face when he walks in. Dean beelines. He's like, you fucked Allie, you fucked my girl, and whatever else kind of history they have together, who knows? So when Hunter walks in, he then says to Logan, you said this was Dean's idea. And this is where I'm like, Logan has such a failing as a friend that he thinks that because this is the best thing for the team, that he's right. And so Dean will just get over it. And what I can't stand about that is clearly Dean didn't want you to. Tucker didn't think this was a good idea. There were multiple cues in which Logan could say, I'm going to preserve my friendship with Dean and maybe work on it from Dean's side and understand where Dean is coming from before I just override what he has asked of me and maybe make things worse for everybody. These two people now have to play together. Especially when Dean has said, like, I'm not playing next to him. What if Dean decides to quit? The fact that Logan thinks that he knows best actually sometimes makes things much worse. And I think that that is a huge part of what Logan needs to understand. I think that needs to be a huge part of his arc. So we end on a fist fight. All the boys are in a fist fight. And I guess we will pick up in season 2 somewhere next spring, learning the repercussions of what has just happened from this fight and where we are. All right, let us go into our feminist follow through, where we will move from entertainment to action. And so one of the most powerful themes in this episode is Hannah's experience with sexual harassment and assault, and the way that those experiences continue to impact survivors long after the initial harm has occurred. Unfortunately, Hannah's story is not uncommon. Sexual harassment and violence affects millions of women and girls, often beginning in schools, where many survivors are left feeling isolated, unsupported, or afraid to speak up. In fact, here in America, this is a national statistic. 1 in 2 girls in grades 7 to 12, about 56% of girls experience sexual harassment, and about 1 in 5 girls ages 14 to 18, which is 21%, experience sexual violence. Studies go so far as to show that as few as 2% of rape reports are considered false. So false accusations are incredibly rare. So this week, I encourage you to explore the work of the Me Too international movement. I will tag it in the show notes, and I will tag very specifically their Let Her Learn toolkit, which is a toolkit that helps to stop school-based sexual harassment. The toolkit provides education, advocacy, resources, and practical steps for students, parents, educators, and community members who want to create safer learning environments like Hannah was in, where she was raped in high school, and hold the institutions that are in their communities accountable. So if you have kids that are in an appropriate age group, you can walk through it with them, walk through this material with them. It's a free resource that you can download. If not, send it to your local school board and advocate that it gets implemented in your school district so that young girls in your district have resources available to them. So whether you're a survivor, an ally, an educator, or simply just somebody who is listening to the show that believes that every student, especially every girl, deserves to learn in an environment without fear of harassment, then take the time to download this toolkit. It's free. And it gives you a lot of information and help turn awareness into action. So that is our feminist follow through for this week. If you download this and you enjoy it, let me know. Send me an email, feminfuriouspod@gmail.com. And now we will crack open our burn book, where we will look at the superlatives for this episode. So the Bold and Bothered Award. This award is strictly for the femme and the furious. It's the quote or the moment that really relays feminine rage. It is Hannah in the locker room telling guys he'll beat them up for even speaking to me. Are you insane with that misogynistic? Sorry, I can't even think straight. There's too many penises in this room. Very funny. Great with the masochist misogynist of it all, but also really, really funny in the way that she delivers this. The Shiro Award. This award goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring or the moment that is the most empowering, and it goes to Hannah's song, which I loved. The Femme Fatale Award, for the most smashed up patriarchy moment of the episode, and low-key, I think it is Allie not wanting to get Carter St. James, aka Hunter Davenport's phone number. Speak Your Truth Trophy for the best line or quote, and it goes to David, who says, I don't subscribe to the notion that art has to be painful. In fact, if done right, letting people into our truth, that can be healing. Honorary heartthrob, because I'm just a girl, okay? And I want to talk about the most swoon-worthy moments, and it is Carter St. James, aka Hunter Davenport, pulling in Allie's chair, and then the makeout where he ends up standing up and cradling her face. He has got a sexy voice. He's not my typical type, but his voice is very sexy, and this entire scene at the bar where he pulls her in and then makes out with her had the feminism evaporating from my body. Just evaporating from my body. I was like, I would be down bad for him. And that's that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Femme and Furious. If you liked it, share it out with your friends. Go follow us on Patreon. Go subscribe. Hang out in the community over there. I will be back on Friday, and we will be diving into the first half of the book of Every Summer After. And until then, try not to be bombarded by penises.